This is a short presentation that introduces some of the forces at work in our psyche that function to keep us trapped in the past and a path out of that mess. We want to grow and evolve toward more self-respect, accountability, integrity, and authenticity. When we hurt someone or screw up, most of us, except psychopaths, experience guilt, which can lead to regret. Guilt is the feeling that we feel when we judge ourselves for having done something that we believe is wrong. Regret has to do with wishing we hadn't taken a particular action. Regret most often is focused on us and our pain. First and foremost, we regret something because it causes us pain and suffering. The other's pain is separate from ours. The judge or superego uses guilt and regret to keep us locked in a dance of ego activity based on hope for control by use of willpower. We hope that by judging ourselves and feeling guilty, we can have control over not doing it again. Guilt always indicates that our wounded ego self is in charge, trying to control the outcome of things with self-judgment. Two of the forces at work here are shame and fear. Shame is associated with exposure and scrutiny. Aggression and self-hatred are two powerful forces the superego uses to keep us locked into this endless dance with our past. So what's the path out of this psychodynamic hell? We need to move beyond regret to remorse. Remorse comes from our heart, while guilt comes from our ego mind. Remorse indicates that a major change has taken place within us, a shift from controlling to learning. But what's the key to remorse? With remorse, there is a connection to the other's pain and suffering. We feel their pain. Their suffering is experienced intimately within our heart. So the key to remorse is empathy. But empathy isn't something we can turn on and off. Empathy is part of being human. Our empathetic capacities are lost or diminished in our childhood process of development. As a defense against hurt and pain, we dampen down our heart sensitivity and toughen up our manliness. There's a lot we can work with here to begin the process of freeing ourselves from the tyranny of the past. The first is to, at least hypothetically, accept the possibility that real change is possible. A change so profound that even though we can't erase the past, we can, as a person, transform so dramatically that we are no longer the person from our past. That person is but a faint memory, and yet we still acknowledge and take responsibility for our past actions. We need to crack the shell that keeps us insulated from the dynamism of being. The smallest of cracks will allow the light in and the process of unwinding and transformation to begin. By the way, you can use this glossary to get some diamond approach perspective on all of this. And now for some input from some other diamond approach teachers.
Yeah, I'm doing a weekly group in prison here.
Oh. And so what do you see?
I see them coming in afraid, uptight, cynical, and in a couple of weeks they start to open up, and then it's like after they've completed this, an 8-week group, they can do 16 weeks, and it's just such a turnaround, and it's really it's a mentoring group, and basically giving them a safe space where they can be honest and take accountability for their actions and look at how they can turn their life around.
Yeah. Noel, who I've been talking to, she does work in prison. And let me pull up this email that I got from her. And So this is from, Noel, who's a teacher in our group and is working with prisoners. As I think about your questions, the first thing that comes to mind is the need for all of us to really listen to the view of those we hurt in some way. This means listening with an open heart, no superego, and a readiness to feel remorse. When the other, whom we have harmed in some way, is unavailable, then we need to use our basic humanness and open-heartedness to imagine the nature of that harm.
Mm.
In prison, some have been tenderized, in quotes, by reckoning with the harm they have done to others. This usually means they have moved from guilt, which is all about me and my self-image, to regret. Yeah, I screwed up, but she should get over it. Often regret is for an action that has negatively affected me, an action whose impact on the other is still held at arm's length. The final and transformative move is to remorse. With remorse, I understand I cannot undo what I have done. I have to live with awareness of the impact of my action. Here, it isn't only the other who has been scarred, but I too carry the scar of my action. There is compassion. I suffer with the other and am aware of how poignantly difficult it is to live as a human being, flawed and vulnerable and at the mercy of so many forces. What are the forces I am at the mercy of? This seems to be another element to this inquiry. How do I become free of those forces? These are some initial thoughts. I hope there's something useful here, but there's no formula for this work. Each of us must come to our own reckoning, and as I said, for each person, this is a unique journey whose trajectory and challenges and supports will vary and depend on many other factors.
Yeah, nice.
So do you see that too? Do you concur that this response, this initial thing of guilt, it really is keeping it all about the person that has usually done something wrong? So to try to work and stay within the realm of guilt means that, we're dealing with your poor feelings, instead of with a situation where you have harmed another or violated another. But dealing with the guilt is something that needs to be addressed in order to unlock and move beyond what's bound up, right?
I mean, we start even just, can you recognize what you're feeling? We're teaching them the ABCs of, what am I feeling right now? And then, we go through mad, sad, glad, afraid, guilt, and shame.
Okay.
And that's basically the territory we're working with. But then it's an open field where they present what's hot for them, and then they support each other, because some of them have spent their whole lives in jail.
Yeah. Yeah, I find remorse to be a very interesting and powerful thing.
Yeah.
I wrote a couple poems about it years ago because of going through that whole process myself. And one insight that I had fairly early on, maybe 5 or 7 years into the work, is trying to use what I understood to be will or willpower at that time was almost 100% ineffective for trying to change my behavior. But when I finally got reconnected to my feelings and I could empathize and feel in myself and recognize what I had done to another person or what another person was feeling, what I realized is that heart is the best compass at all.
Yeah.
Because we really do suffer tremendously when our hearts are open and we're moving into the territory of hurting someone else emotionally or spiritually, or
So that's a key ingredient to me, is having the heart open.
Yeah.
And remorse has a way of keeping that compass pointed north.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We asked a Hawaiian kahuna to give us a name for our group, and she called us Ka'ipuha'a, the humble vessel.
Mm.
And that's what I see. It's like they come in and, you know, they're defended and arrogant, but the circle drops them into a place where they really get humble and they get honest and authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, so I'm coordinating a men's program and a women's program in the jail.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I trained 5 women, and they're running the women's program now. And I've trained 7 men, and you know, we rotate out. We've got 4 facilitators go in at any one time.
Wow.
So 4 facilitators and 16 prisoners, and we're there for like 2 hours every Wednesday.
So 16 prisoners in the group. That's the group size.
Yeah, and 4 facilitators. But we you know, but we're mentors. We actively participate in the group, modeling to the men how to just be open, vulnerable, honest, and authentic.
Yeah, I've limited the size of this group to 36 because I plan on having at least 2 teachers there, so we can break up into groups of 18, or 3 teachers there will break up into groups of 12. And most of the work will be done and engaged in smaller groups, and then come back and, you know, questions and comments and interaction with the big group. So I thought that really, you know, 18 is about the max to do something like that with.
Yeah, that is a max group. Yeah.
You know, but most of these people will have done work in the school already, so don't have to give them.
So it'll be like a small group with a focus. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find it very interesting, your mix with your history. I mean, you're a you know, a long time student in the school, a teacher in the school. I think you studied Fourth Way before that, Gurdjieffian stuff.
I lived with Osho for 8 years.
And did Osho.
Yeah.
But there was also a period where you worked in hospice for quite a while.
I still do.
Oh, you do?
I've been working in hospice since '86.
Yeah. And so that's an interesting thing too. Surely you've had interaction with people that have regrets on their deathbed, and some of them are probably around stuff like this. And and now you're working in the prison with people. It seems to me that brings you a unique perspective on all this.
Yeah.
So
you know, I used to work for an agency called Alternatives to Violence. Really? So I led perpetrators groups for a couple of years, and I would co-facilitate it with a woman. And basically, she led the group, and I was there to protect her from these guys. You know, and I would kind of validate what she was saying, but she was the leader, and they had to listen to her. And they were all court mandated for beating their wives.
Yeah. So what just off the cuff, you know, a group of people, say take any group of 30 men, you know, and they're all over the place with their interactions and their history with women.
Yeah.
How would you advise people, given what we know about our culture and how things go down quite often in so many cases, and somebody wants to start looking at their part or contribution in this?
Well,
Or
as Noel said, you really got to get the superego out of the way so that you're not coming from a place of judging yourself, but you want to be accountable for, any actions that you've taken that may have hurt someone. And then how do you make amends for that? And how do you forgive yourself?
yeah. And how do you define accountable?
Taking responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing's clear: we can't change our history.
No.
You're always going to be able to look back and say, "Yeah, I did that."
Yeah. Yeah.
But who is it that's looking back and saying that?
Yeah.
That's
I'll give you an example, John. Before I joined Alternatives to Violence, I was in the Child Welfare Service, and I had this case where it was a young kid who had been sexually abused by his stepfather, and his mother and him had escaped to the mainland because this guy was a murderer. He was known to have killed people, and the district attorney called them back to stand trial against the guy. So, and basically, as their caseworker, I had to sit in the courtroom with them just to calm them down before they went into the court. And so they went in, and then they rushed them to the airport. And the woman left her jacket with her wallet, with all the money. They didn't have money. They were poor people. And so she's on her way back to the mainland with no jacket, no wallet. And I called the attorney and asked her, well, how can I get this to her? Oh, I can't tell you. She wouldn't give me the information, and I lost it. I called her a fucking bitch. And when I was in the interview for Alternatives to Violence, they knew that this had happened. And they said, well, how can we let you counsel men who beat up their wives when you call the district attorney a fucking bitch? I'm going, because I have that in me. I have that aggression. I have that anger, and I was helpless, and I lost it with her. And I said, I'm working on that myself, and I know that I will not act out on it. I would never hit her, but I'm still being emotionally violent by calling her a fucking bitch.
Right.
And they accepted it and gave me a chance. But it was like, at that point, I wasn't able to hold my anger.
Yeah. I'll tell you another thing that's interesting with my life is I grew up in a military family, a lot of drinking and partying, and with parents that were over-sexualized and pretty liberal in their views around all that. And, so I got some weird stuff in me. But the last 8 years of my father's life, we lived together, right? And so I got to see some of this stuff really up close, that was still so active and prevalent in him, and go, God, that stuff's in me. I say, well, how'd that get there? It's not like your parents sit you down and it's like you pick it up through some form of osmosis, you're just absorbing it in the environment and what have you.
Yeah.
And all the time, every day there's an instance, like, oh, there's that. There's my father. There's that, I mean, you and I are getting a little long in the tooth. I'm pushing 69 in a couple of months. And, it's weird when you're young and you think about being old, you think, well, you're going to be old and you're going to, your internal state's going to reflect your external looks. Well, everybody will tell you that's not the case. I mean, you feel like you're 30, 40 years old right now inside, right? Full of vitality and whatever. Or,
I've been in bed for the last 8 days with a cold.
Well,
I feel about 104.
but
Yeah.
and and so I'll find myself in a situation talking to a young lady, as long as, young, anything 20 years younger than me for this
Yeah.
particular situation. And I feel all of that engagement and energies coming and what have you. And I go, wait a second, she's looking at somebody that's 68.
Yeah.
This what's coming up at me doesn't quite feel like appropriate with
Yeah.
with that. You feel the flirting coming, the old habits and that type of thing, and
Yeah.
it's like, whoa, wait a second,
Mhm.
and that's really how I handle some of it is, who is she seeing?
Yeah.
It's not some 28-year-old kid anymore or 33-year-old guy or whatever, you know, and to be able to hold those energies and to be able to interact with a person, another human being of the opposite sex or even the same sex, in a way that uh, has openness and freedom for them,
Sure.
you know, and has openness and freedom for me, where I'm not all bound up around things.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
so that's the orientation. It sounds like it's similar to what you're doing, but
Mhm.
a little, maybe a little different, because I think that there's this part of people that are on the spiritual path that they have this misconception and idealization that if you start having spiritual experiences, you're not going to have issues with your instincts and your animal soul, and all that's going to get cleared up.
Right.
In spite of the fact that there is story after a guru or whoever that has.
Mhm.
And so that thing that we went through a few years ago with I can't remember the woman's name, but on power, asymmetrical power,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and how that is at play. If there's an asymmetrical relationship with anyone, a boss and an employee,
Yeah.
a student and a teacher, uh, that's at play regardless of what you think's going on,
Mhm.
and that needs to be in awareness and allowed for.